Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Rachel Wilson, an actress you might remember from Breaker High, Gideon's Crossing, Bomb Girls, Republic of Doyle, or Bruce McDonald's Hellions. She co-stars opposite Dylan Bruce and Kristian Bruun in the Butler Brothers' new comedy First Round Down, which opens in Toronto this Friday, May 5th, before rolling out across Canada. Rachel chose Terms of Endearment, James L. Brooks' Oscar-winning dramedy about the lives of Aurora Greenway and her daughter Emma, played by Shirley MacLaine and Deborah Winger. Based on the novel by Larry McMurtry, it's a film that spans decades while still feeling remarkably light on its feet, offering a host of great supporting performances and balancing comedy and tragedy so well you won't even see the body blows coming. Nominated for 11 Academy Awards, it won 5 pretty big ones. Brooks himself picked up the prizes for picture, director, and adapted screenplay, while MacLaine was named Best Actress and Jack Nicholson took Best Supporting Actor. Can't say they didn't earn them. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I went through a whole bunch of movies in my head, actually, when I first got the email from Winnie, because I have a problem of wanting to be right and choose the right one.
Sure.
But it's one of my oldest favorites, so, and I've been an actor since I was 12. Probably like a little bit younger. I think I started around 9. I'm a child actor. And I saw this movie probably like around 17 or 18, like right before I went to university. And, you know, the time in your life when everyone's like, what's your favorite movie? And it was this movie and Last Tango in Paris, which is a very odd combination.
That is an interesting,
and I had the posters of both of them up in my dorm room. It was very odd in University of Toronto. But anyway, I chose it because it was one of the first films that I remember performance-wise like really stuck with me. I just really related to the mother-daughter relationship.
Okay.
And Deborah Winger herself as an actor, I'm a big fan. Shirley MacLaine as well. And I think sometimes when you see something, at least for me personally, when I've seen something that resonates for me on a very personal level, then it kind of hooks me right away, and then it sticks with me. It's like the first time I saw a film that really emotionally hooked me in.
Okay.
I know that the other first was like the first time I saw a play like really hooked me in. It was Les Mis, which is also kind of like sad and melodramatic,
but hugely so, right? Like
but hugely so. It's very grand,
bludgeoned with emotion.
Yes, exactly. So that's why I picked it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by the pairing of Terms of Endearment and Last Tango. Is it just the performance? Is it just like the level of commitment of the actor?
It possibly is, because they're both very grand. Yeah. And I mean, Marlon Brando, he's very big.
It's a huge performance.
Yeah. And I'm, for some reason, I've always also been drawn to films sort of set in the 70s and 80s. I don't know why. I think that there's a certain style of acting too, which is in itself can feel now a bit dated when you watch.
Sure.
But do you know what I mean? But I like the older style of, I don't know, I guess 70s. I don't know. I've always been drawn to the 70s in general as an era.
Well, it's also that in the 70s, you know, like supposedly the big deal was realism and emotional realism and also image realism. They were trying to be as
they talk about
stripped down as honest as possible.
Like naturalism. They use that term a lot in the 70s,
yeah.
which now to us is just like, oh, well, you're just watching.
That's how things work.
Exactly. But and then there's also been like cinema verite, which obviously this is not that.
Yeah.
I
mean, James Brooks was actually catching some flack at the time because he was a TV guy. This was his first feature.
Yes.
And it was perceived as a little sitcom-y.
Exactly. Like they've described it in reviews as sitcom-y. But I totally disagree with that, because I think a sitcom is, you know, I think a sitcom is formulaic, which obviously this is to a certain extent, but I felt that the characters were not acting. Like it didn't feel schmaltzy. It felt the emotions are big and real. In fact, all the emotions in all the situations are very big, but nothing felt overdone to me, and everything felt very grounded and real, almost like you are watching somebody's family having and the way he moves seamlessly between the different time periods is like incredible. Like, you know, without making a big flourish. So even though it's grand and big, it's also very rooted and grounded and natural. Like the emotions are big, but he keeps it. I don't know. I don't know if it's just him as well as the acting. You know, and the writing too.
I think absolutely. The just Larry McMurtry's book is so matter of fact. I think about what happens.
Exactly.
The book doesn't. I read the book after the fact.
Oh, you read the book?
Yeah, I was a kid when the film came out. I must have been 1983. I would have been 15 when it played, and all I knew when I went to see it was that it wasn't The Right Stuff, and The Right Stuff was amazing.
Yes.
So how could it lose?
How could it be that?
Yeah. But it's a different sort of thing completely.
Exactly.
It's simply a different genre. It's a different animal.
Exactly. It's like a family romantic comedy, technically.
It's just a massively complex, simple movie.
It's just a lot that goes on. Exactly. Yeah. But it doesn't, like you said, is not. It doesn't sit in it for too long. It doesn't comment on the fact that it is this. It just is that. You know?
Yeah.
As opposed to like, oh, here comes the big dramatic moment. You know, every moment in it is quite dramatic. So you can't really have all of those moments being as big. Otherwise, the movie would be like, oh, you're always in climax kind of mode.
The audience I saw it with it played like a comedy.
Yes.
I saw it at the Long Gone Plaza Theater in Toronto.
You did?
Yeah. And they were into it. The audience liked it.
Yeah.
There was there was hissing at Jeff Daniels, and there was a genuine tension here and there, but it wasn't. And they loved Nicholson. They loved him.
He's so brilliant.
Giggled magically.
He's just like, he oozes, you know, it's what you know, is what I know of Jack Nicholson, and seeing him in later performances over the years, you know. People can say, oh, well, he's not really acting. But of course he is. I mean, his dance with Shirley MacLaine is amazing. They obviously have great chemistry together, and they play off each other, and he just manages to pull off that, like, total disgusting, like, gross, you know, part of his personality with a charm, right? So then you're like, you really, really don't want to like him, and you do like him.
Yeah, it was jarring to me later to figure it all out, and realize that while MacLaine had been around making movies as a star for 20 odd years, and so her playing Aurora is sort of a natural transition into middle-aged roles and being an older actor. Nicholson was, like, 10 years away from Five Easy Pieces. It's shocking.
It is shocking,
how much older he plays.
He plays a lot older. You're right. How much older he reads. You're right. That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting.
I was really surprised. Like, The Last Detail and those early 70s films were barely a decade away.
Yeah, you're right. And
here he is, balding, fat.
Yeah.
Just...
I feel like he just went for it always though in his career, right? Like he's just like, here it is. This is what I got. He kind of just throws it out there. Like the scene in the car where he's, oh my gosh, it makes me so uncomfortable but so hilarious when he's asking the woman to come into his house, and he's like, so he's gonna come home with me, you know, and he's like bleeding from the head. Because to me that's just like a person who's totally unabashedly ashamed of who they are and who they've become, you know. Or you could just say he's an alcoholic, but
it's both.
But his performance,
I mean, that's what it is.
Yes,
you can see it in
his
him.
performance is very real. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And he's probably as close to a cartoon as the film offers. I mean, in that he's larger than life and
he's very large. Bigger. Yeah, but he is very real. So it's I find it so great. You're right, in terms of sitcom, that's where it is. Yeah. It's like that ability to play grounded and real So I said I disagree, but I don't think I do disagree. I understand your reference now.
There's room to move. That's okay.
Thanks. But because in terms of, you know, I always said that, like, if you're watching Jennifer Aniston and she's doing something so outlandish, but she's totally grounded in what she's doing, right? So that's the same.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the nature of this comes up a lot. The nature of comedy is, I think, if you're making a broad farce, you can go as big as you want, but if you're making a human story that has comedy in it, then everything has to come from either arrogance or insecurity.
Yes.
And the character of Garrett Breedlove has both of those.
Absolutely.
Like that quality, both of those qualities are living in him at all times.
Absolutely. That's such a good point.
Yeah. And what was really surprising was he's not in the book. That was an invention of Brooks's.
He's not in the book. Yeah. I know. And I didn't know that either until later, long after I'd watched it. Like, I didn't read the book, but I read a couple of reviews, and I know it's interesting, but I feel like her character absolutely needed that. Like, I can't imagine. Yeah, the book must have been, because I didn't read it, I don't know.
It's much more... Well, it's Larry McMurtry, so it's much more literary. It's more considered. It's much more thoughtful. Right. It's less one-linery.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing that Brooks brought to it was a sense of life to keep people, invested and engaged.
And the humor.
Yeah, but the characters of oh my god, I'm blanking on Deborah Winger's characters.
Oh no, it's okay.
It's not Alice.
It's Emma.
Emma, thank you.
That's okay. I'm impressed that you got Jack Nicholson's character.
Garrett Breedlove.
You got his last name, so I know. I didn't know his last name.
It's such an on-the-nose name. But it also sounds like Colonel Breedlove.
Yeah,
you could
and then he was an astronaut.
Yeah.
And then that's like his big claim to fame. I love when she goes to his house for the first time and she sees like all of his trophies everywhere. I mean, it's just, you're right. It's the arrogance and insecurity. And people relate to that character, right away. And...
But in the story of Aurora and Emma, which is pulled straight out of the novel, that detail that's always there, the ambivalence of Aurora about motherhood, about not knowing, which which Brooks kind of short circuits with that opening scene where her neurosis and her love are one and the same. They can't she can't disassociate one from the other.
No, and like the shaking of her in the crib, and no, for sure.
And it plays funny. I mean, it's
so funny.
A woman is torturing a baby, and it's
totally
so funny.
It's so funny, and the way they discuss the whole way through. I mean, there's a part at the end where she, I don't want to spoil the movie for anyone who hasn't seen it, but
by now,
basically by the end, I'm sure everyone's seen it. Where she's, lying there and she says, we're always arguing, and she's like, we are? Like, she didn't know that they were. So it's just like different perspectives on people. Like her daughter thinks that they've never been arguing, and she thinks that they argue all the time. I mean, I think a lot of mother-daughter relationships are, not just mother-daughter, father-son, whatever, family relationships are like that.
Fraught, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like only from the outside. If you're on the inside, it's just the way it is. Kids don't know, right?
They
Kids
don't know.
Think whatever is happening is normal.
Dysfunction in your home is not apparent until you leave your home, right?
Right, yeah. Like I must have been 15 before I really understood that most people's parents weren't getting divorced at 10. Like that was my experience, and it doesn't apply to everybody else.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when that ending comes, and it does come out of nowhere, just as it does in the book. It just
happens.
Yeah, it's a new direction, and the audience I saw it with could not handle it. They were. It
was very tragic.
Yeah, but full on, like instantly. You're like pulling the air out of the room.
Well, and because he set up these characters. I mean, the novel has set up the characters, and then James Brooks also sets up the characters so you care about them so much. I mean, obviously you want your audience always to care about your main characters, but these characters are presented in a way that's like they're never going anywhere, and it's light and it's funny, and there's a lot of comedy in it. And every time I see it, I lose it, and I lose it sometimes way early in the movie because I'm like, I know it's coming, it's coming, and just the way she is with her children, and somehow weirdly I saw this film way before I had a child. It always resonated with me. My mom and I have a very close relationship, and she has 4 children. And she used to always tell us, like, you can never understand the love that a parent has for a child. And so I remember seeing it like that and thinking, oh yeah, I think I get it. But now watching it again after I had a kid, I was like, oh my God, it's even more, heart-wrenching.
Well, I was going to say, can you even bear that?
No, the scene, like actually, when I just rewatched it this week, the scene with her son, I was like, no, it was really awful. Like, it's like those sobs where you're like, and I was like, I have to finish watching it. But you can't, it's hard to go there emotionally, it's something like that. It wasn't as hard before, and watching a movie in a different place in your life, it affects you differently.
It's weird too for where it lands. I'm watching it again. I was thinking that I guess this is sort of where the third act tragedy comes from, but then of course you realize no, it's the whole history of cinema. That's not new.
Yeah,
it's just handled so effortlessly. It just doesn't even, because it plays like a twist, because he set it up as breezy and light, and the music is happy-ish, and the colors are bright, and you see this pleasant little world invaded by malignancy, and what happens after that is just, it's merciless. Yeah, it's just remorseless.
But it's like a reminder of life,
which is how it would play. Right? Exactly.
It's just how life is, and I think it's universal in that everybody's had some kind of tragedy, some kind of loss, and it encourages you to just like sit in it.
Yeah.
But not necessarily be morose about it, because even Deborah Winger's Emma's character, she's very, with her kids, like everything, this is the way it's going to go, and I love the look she has with Shirley MacLaine at the end, right as she's leaving. It's like she always had you know, I know I've read a lot of reviews that say, you know, her character is very flat. Deborah Winger's character, you know, that it wasn't her film, that it wasn't whatever, and I never felt like that. I felt like all the characters were so colorful, and Emma, her character and her relationship with her mom, is she had like a mischievousness about her, like a little girl quality always, like through the whole thing, and at the end she kind of gives her a wink, like, you know, I'm gonna see you again, like it, just a really cool sort of. And apparently they did not like each other when they were shooting the film. Yeah. You probably know
I've heard stories.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know if it's true,
yeah,
but
I would assume that, I don't know, like in the age of actual journalism, it's hard. If you look back at the stories, you'll get these weird quasi-gossipy reports.
Sure.
But I would assume that Brooks would make sure they at least understood where they were coming from as actors, because what's going on is really interesting.
It is interesting.
You are watching a movie in which a character tries to absorb all the attention from her daughter.
Yes.
But it's not an actor sucking the air from her co-star, because what Winger is doing is so, you know, simple and small.
Yes.
Versus what McLean is doing, and that is a strategy.
Yes.
Clearly you don't, that's not an accident. Those actors are doing those things on purpose.
Yes, unless they were just cast like that. Yeah, you know what I mean?
That Brooks knew that they could do it.
He knew that they would play off each other like that. Exactly. But I did see glimmers of it. I mean, and also in any mother-daughter relationship, you know, you have that, not everyone, and can't speak for everyone, but there's a level of competitiveness. So I felt like they played on that, and then the level of like losing that person, and, you know, when she gets married, it's like that, you know, because she was her only child, it's like she's losing her lover. Right. You know, there's all those like deeper levels of like, she's mine and now I have to let her go to you. But in my mind, like, she never left home. You know, she never left home. She was married to her mother, like, through the whole movie. You know, she was not as close with anybody as she was with her mother, right?
Right, and that's maybe one of the reasons that the relationship with Flat, I can't even
didn't work. Flat.
Such a dumb name.
And isn't he so great, Jeff Daniels? Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love him in the film because it's a cool performance. You know?
He's terrific in it. Yeah, it's a beautifully conceived relationship because he has to show enough appeal that we can understand why Emma would want him.
Yeah.
And then we get to hate him before she does.
Yes.
So he has to play to those sort of indicate the cracks.
Yes.
And
he's
just
like
watch
lost.
The facade fall away, and he never wants to take responsibility for it, and nothing is his fault. It just keeps happening.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, I know how tall John Lithgow is, and I was just really hoping he'd clock him.
Right?
Take him.
I know, you're like, he could take him on, because he's like this sweet, gentle guy. I know. And you know, and Jeff Daniels' character almost too is like he's screwed from the beginning. So it's like that child that's always talked about in a bad way, so he just continues to behave
How can
like
he
that,
not fall into that pattern?
Exactly. Yeah. And her line to Shirley MacLaine's line to Deborah Winger when she says, "You're not special enough to survive a bad marriage," is like one of my very favorite, you know, very earnestly to her, like, you are not special enough, you know.
But it's horrible.
Yeah. Her fierceness, you know, she doesn't come to the wedding. Right? So it's just interesting, and in family dynamics, that stuff happens all the time, so I found it very, I really liked how it played out. I just found, every time I watch it, I enjoy it. Yeah. So much.
Do you experience the thing, a friend of mine, John Harkness, once said beautifully that every time he watches The Rules of the Game, the Renoir film, his favorite thing about it is that he will sympathize with a different character.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the movie hasn't changed, but his perspective
oh my gosh,
shifts.
Yeah.
Do you find that happening?
Definitely. Oh, that's such a good point. Because you do, especially if you've seen it a whole bunch of times, because you start watching different things, like in any film. And because there's no one that I disliked, you know, and then because I could see everybody's point of view, and to me that's really good acting, when you can see every character's point of view, because that character is liking their character, and that character is fighting for what they think is, you know, important. Nobody's playing like, I'm the bad guy or I'm the good, you know what I mean? Right. And in the movie there's so many black and white, there's so many gray areas, not black and white, you know. Like Jack Nicholson, Garrett's character is like, you're like, ugh, you're hideous, but he's amazing, you know. He's like good with kids, and he says the right thing, and just like people. So that's why I like so much about it, is so real. And Deborah, Emma, you know, I mean, she stays in a bad marriage. She chooses to stay in a bad marriage, you know, and she does things that aren't great too. It's like people, you know. Yeah. It's
a rare film that, well, that's the line from The Rules of the Game. Everyone has his reasons, but there aren't a lot of American movies that are willing to allow for imperfection.
Yeah.
everything, I mean, now and then,
Yeah.
everything after about 1977, when blockbusters took over,
Yes.
was about definitive black and white morality, and
Yeah.
there are good guys and there are bad guys, and there are people who you can trust and there are people who you can't trust.
Yeah.
And yeah, Terms of Endearment is a film where it's just fishtailing morally all over the place, because not because it doesn't have a perspective, but because it understands that there is no perspective.
Yes.
And that's the thing that I wonder if that's why people had trouble with it getting serious at the end, because as long as
It was light.
yeah, as long as it's bouncy, then you can accept all of these things, and it's a farce. People cheat on each other, it's door slamming kind of thing, only slower and over decades.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden,
It's real.
there's a reckoning.
Yeah, yeah. I bet you're right. I bet people
wonder.
didn't necessarily want it because as a human, you can. It's important to see yourself reflected. But if you're sitting in the bad stuff too long, people
Yeah.
don't always want to sit in their bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's you're right. It's easier if you keep it lighter. I was just thinking for some reason while you're talking of that movie, Ordinary People.
Oh yeah,
Because in terms of, and it's sort of around that. I don't know if it's around that time.
yeah. It was 1980s
set?
Best Picture winner, so it was just
1980, yeah.
3-4 years behind it.
Because that's another film which I felt like showed people in all their gritty, like, realness, not so black and white.
Yeah,
And-
although that one, see, there's this little window where it's sort of the last remnants of the American New Wave fighting for control over commercial studio cinema, because
Yeah.
you've got Kramer versus Kramer, which
Yeah,
is this deeply
I love that
human
too.
movie about
Yeah.
deeply flawed people.
Yes.
The following year, there's Ordinary People,
Yes.
which is a little more. I like it, but
Not as same as Kramer versus Kramer. Like,
well, I think the thing that's missing in Ordinary People, because it slots in between Kramer versus Kramer in Terms of Endearment, is
Yeah.
that Ordinary People is so very, very, very static.
Yes.
It's really serious.
it's just about that one
and
topic.
and
that's
almost
it.
claustrophobic.
Yeah, you're right.
intentionally so.
Yeah.
It's not a flaw.
It's
just-
harrowing. It's like you just have to keep watching these people's grief.
exactly,
Yeah.
and you're locked in with it, and
Yeah.
there's sort of the kind of there's kind of an emotional sadism to something
There's
like
no
that.
movement.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
you want to get out and get some air.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah,
And-
that's actually a really good point.
Yeah, and these other films, Kramer versus Kramer, only spans a year or so, I think. But by following them through everything in that tiny space of time, and then in Terms of Endearment, by following them through everything
Yes.
over decades, you just have more of a sense of life
Yes.
instead of lifelessness.
Yes. And I was thinking also of Boyhood, which was recently
Sure,
out, right? Is that the right name?
Boyhood, the Linklater film.
Yeah. But because the difference in terms of, which I enjoyed very much, but what I found fascinating about Terms of Endearment, it's a different type of film, but it has
Sure.
the same kind of idea. Is there was no super dead moments, because sometimes when you're showing everything, there's going to be just like, this is sort of like, but in Terms of Endearment, I just found like you are moving along the whole entire time, and it's still telling a story, as opposed to sometimes you're telling something really long and drawn out, and it's a little bit, I could nod
So
off.
builds in the
At certain
meandering.
points, yeah, there's some
Yeah.
meandering, like Boyhood had some moments that were,
Yeah, well, that's what I loved about Boyhood, is that it gives you the space to see a personality forming, which is not the purpose of Terms of Endearment.
Yes, it's a different type of film, right?
Exactly, yeah. But it uses time, and it uses incident in a completely different way. I love the scene where they're throwing saw blades around.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and what we watch is a kid knowing, I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah.
But everybody's waiting for, somebody's going to back into a
Yeah.
blade, something's going to
And
happen.
nothing big.
Yeah, and it's just observational.
Yeah.
It's him realizing, this is a stupid thing. And the whole movie has this
How it's going to
amazing-
form him.
Yeah. This amazing undercurrent that pays off so beautifully in that moment at the very, very end, where his dad offers him a drink and he says, no thanks. And he
Yeah.
says, no, you can have a beer. And he's like, no, I don't want to. And we know why. And
Yes.
that's it. We've just watched all the things
Yes.
that got him there.
And it all comes together like that. Yeah, no,
and
for sure.
In Terms of Endearment has a structure.
Yes.
It has a comic dramatic structure of events. You know
Yes.
what they call, what do they call it now? It's this great weird major life events. I
Major
think.
life events.
Like a wedding or a child.
Yeah.
Has become codified into, this is a major life event.
Yeah.
Because that way we can process it more easily and deal
Sure.
with it. Because everything has to be compartmentalized.
Right, of course.
So, but from a structural screenplay point, it's genius, because how do you tell a story of somebody getting older? Well, you give them a kid.
Yeah.
You show them you watch these big
Yeah.
moments. But again, it's the stuff between the big moments. It's just that weird first date with Garrett,
Yeah.
or the time that she meets Sam at the counter
Yeah.
at the
And just time passing.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. The hair is a little different. the
yeah.
clothes
It's
are-
a subtle evolution instead of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3.
Yeah, it's true.
And then and then Act 3 comes in.
Yeah.
And
like,
just
which is like the fluidity, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, like there's movement all the time.
Yeah, and you have the sense that these people, you know, the actors and the characters legitimately don't know what's coming next.
No.
Which is...
Well, they're just in life, right?
Yeah.
They're just like we are, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the part movies that just make me think of, movies that just accurately reflect to me what living is about are my favorite.
Yeah.
I was thinking about picking Breaking the Waves, and then I was like, oh no, that's way too tragic. And you know, for some reason my picks are always a little bit dark and sad.
Mm-hmm. Well, Breaking the Waves is a lot.
Oh my god, it's so dark. I'm like, it'll be way too sad. It'll be too morose. I actually had to watch that movie in 3 parts because I was totally traumatized by several scenes. She's so great in it. But yeah,
it's funny. Sophia Bodanowicz did Dancer in the Dark.
Yes.
And we worked in some stuff about Breaking the Waves because that's the one I prefer of the two.
You do, yeah.
Because it gives you the out of the bells ringing,
yes.
and it's like, oh, okay, good.
Yes, you're like, okay, good, the bells are ringing.
At least there's suffering, but at least there's purpose.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. I know, because if there's no purpose, then it's really dark, and it can be. But yeah.
And religion, again, with Terms of Endearment being an American kind of a happier movie, there's not a lot of it. There's no great sense of a structure there, which I find interesting too, because these characters are just have each other. Yeah. And in the end, it gets smaller, and so the focus gets smaller and smaller until it's just people in a hospital bed. Yeah. And it's crushing.
I know it is, and then that's just it, you know. But you do have the sense that everything's going to be okay. Like it's not so tragic that it's obviously super tragic, but they do wrap it up with some, you know, a nice scene with everybody, and you know that Garrett's going to be there for her, hopefully, and
generally optimistic.
Yeah. I mean, they could have left it just like that, stark, whatever. But Shirley MacLaine is really one of my favorites. I mean, there's just so many cool moments of her in the film. I just love her outfit, and she reminds me also of like a Tennessee Williams character. Like I couldn't. Every time she put on one of her gowns and her frilly lace, I would laugh because it's like a debutante basically. Yeah. You know, with her gentleman collars.
Yeah, her constant need to be noticed.
Yeah.
It's not. There's a phrase that fascinates me. Malevolent narcissism.
Oh yeah.
I don't think she's malevolent. She just needs to be.
She's definitely a narcissist.
Attention must be paid, right?
Like her daughter says, Deborah Winger says she's pregnant, and she screams like,
it's all
not
about
ready
her
to be a
becoming
grandmother.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, so mad, so incensed. Like, how dare you do that to me?
Yeah, and she goes so big.
Yeah.
Because she has to, because it's a defense mechanism. We understand her.
That personality.
Yeah. We understand her as well as the impact she has, which I think is great, because you can write off a lot of characters in fiction as devices to create conflict.
Sure.
You know, like just programmed into a scene to make something explode.
To make something exciting or fun or whatever,
And I watch her and I think this woman is just deeply unhappy.
She's just unhappy. And she's in it, and she's, you know, expressing herself at every turn because she knows that her daughter loves her unconditionally too. She has people around her that love her, you know, regardless of how she is. Yeah. But she is unhappy. She's unhappy for sure. Yeah. She can't open up until she meets the astronaut.
Right.
And then she's terrified.
Yeah, and because he's the one person with a bigger personality than her. And oddly enough is more comfortable in it.
Yeah.
I think...
And he challenges her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the two of them, it's bizarre that no one had thought to put them together before.
It is bizarre, and it's almost like she needed someone to take the bug out of her ass, literally, and he needed someone... Sorry, I don't know if I can say that. Yeah, and he needed someone to be like an anchor, you know, because he didn't have that, right? Yeah. So it's like the opposites. But their personalities are opposite too, for sure, because Shirley MacLaine's always had a very sort of contained... She always, to me, even when I saw her in, what was that movie where she plays a prostitute?
Sweet Charity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She has a regalness to her. And she has like a very collectedness to her at even a very young age. I remember like she has that feeling. Whereas Jack Nicholson's just messy. Yeah. He's always just like disheveled and, you know, slicking his hair. With his spit. That's like my favorite when he slicks his hair with his... but yeah, they're very cool. The opposites.
Yeah,
opposites are always cool to watch.
It is sort of a collision of acting styles too, just because Nicholson was he's a magnificent actor who doesn't do very much.
He doesn't do very much
overtly.
at all.
He's not an indicator. And what she does, I mean, I'm thinking of something like The Apartment, where it's just such a pleasure to watch her adjust her bracelets and just compose herself.
Yeah.
And it's not ticky. It's just behavior.
It's just behavior.
But then you put them together, and what she does with her arms and legs, and when she's angry, when she's sort of arching like a praying mantis at one point, just sort of rearing up.
Yes.
And he just sort of slouches into it.
Yes.
It's fascinating.
Yeah,
as a
their
contrast.
body language is totally interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Do you remember the scene in the driveway when he's asking her if she wants to have lunch, and then he's like, come closer, and she has her arm like this, like she has her arm, like holding herself, like protecting herself the whole time. There was just some very specific gestures that she did, which I found were so cool. He touches her on the arm just to see, and she's like, know.
No, it's great.
Yeah, the physicality is awesome.
It's wonderful to watch, legitimate legends play.
Yeah.
Instead of walk around inhabiting their legends, which can be exhausting.
For sure. For sure.
And at a time when neither of them was doing very much in a weird way. Nicholson had done Reds.
Yeah, you're right. It was 3 or 4 years before.
And 81, I think. And people just weren't ready for this.
Yeah.
Because his performance in Reds it's great. It's contained and small and minimalist, but he doesn't look like a burned out old man.
No, he doesn't.
Just a couple of years later to see him show up in this movie doing that.
It's interesting. He's obviously very method.
Yeah, he's all in.
Like, I was like, oh, he's just like letting everything go for that movie, He's really Garrett for the whole time that he's playing that. I mean, it'd be interesting to know. I don't know where he was personally in his life at that time, but
yeah, that's true. Early 80s, who knows? And then he sort of kept it, which is interesting. He just sort of, it's like his debut as a character actor now.
Yeah, exactly, because he did similar work in As Good as It Gets.
Honor, much later. Well, As Good as It Gets does feel like a sort of an echo, or a worst case scenario for Garrett.
Exactly, like waved down. But Pritzi's Honor,
it's falling apart and completely without human. Well, Pritzi's Honor, he's playing this magnificent idiot.
Yeah, he's so good.
Yeah.
He's so great. Yeah. He's so great. They all are. And I just think, like, as an actor, to watch that kind of acting too, I don't know, for some reason Deborah Winger just stuck with me for many years after that.
Yeah, we haven't really discussed her at all, and she is, I maintain that she should have won the Oscar. It's very interesting. It's her movie.
I wondered why, but it's not, because if you look at it actually structurally, she's the protagonist.
It begins when she's born and it ends when she's
but it's really about
Aurora.
It is, right? So it's an interesting thing, and I feel like her character is like the character that supports everyone. And then it's actually interesting that she does get sick, because if you support everybody like that, she has nothing left for herself. So similarly, the character, is like, it's not about me. Like, she's always like, it's not about me. And the character, as a character, but as an actor, she's giving everything. Yeah. So it's an interesting kind of mix, you know.
And the Academy tends to confuse, best acting with most acting, and MacLaine is definitely bigger. And
I mean, Shirley MacLaine has been around longer. She did win a Golden Globe, I believe, for it.
Winger,
or was nominated.
Yeah,
I think she actually won the Golden Globe. Yeah, the scene in the parking lot with John Lithgow is my favorite, though.
Yeah,
she's like, go wait in the car, Tommy. Go wait in the car, Tommy. Go wait in the car, Tommy.
Yeah, it's just the moments when she cracks and you see.
And then she sort of recovers, but not quite. Because she's just like, anyway. And he tries to tell her that she's a good mother. Right. He's like, you're really good with them. I can tell you're really great with them.
Yeah. And that's the weird thing, too, is that Brooks can find the easy laugh, that he can sort of let the air out, let the tension out, and just let people breathe again.
Yes.
That's his, like, even though that how do I frame this? The sequence with the checkout girl.
Yeah.
Then you must be from New York punchline. That landed. That broke up my audience.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like an incredibly cheap shot. It's the one time in the movie.
It is a cheap shot. Yeah. It totally is. But everybody laughs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we also see just how mean he can be.
Oh, yeah.
And
because he usually plays characters. He often has played characters like that. He doesn't always play the softer.
No, well, at the time, people only knew him from The World According to Garp, I think.
Yeah.
Buckaroo Banzai hadn't even come out yet.
Yeah,
and
you're right.
He was just this strange, soft-voiced big man.
Yeah, I know.
Presence that no one quite knew what to do with.
He's so lovely.
He's great.
He's
and
so lovely.
That little flash of authority and just cruelty, it makes his character more interesting. And it does get a laugh, but it also tells us...
It's like a cheap shot.
Yeah, this isn't going to turn out well either. That this is a bad relationship, potentially, for Emma, as much as he may be devoted to her.
Yeah, it's true.
This guy's not great.
Yeah.
Again, complexity, right? You see it in everything.
For sure. And the fact that he turned her down for the loan at the bank initially, so you get the sense of, like... Yeah, there's just... From the beginning, that whole relationship... But I don't know. I sort of totally fell for him because I felt for him because, you know, his whole situation with his wife and all that kind of stuff. But and
we can understand how they'd be drawn to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, we can actually see the attraction, even though neither of them should be doing what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I stepped on.
No, it's okay. I always just felt too like Emma wasn't totally into him, but she was just sort of like, well, I think she just liked him as a person, you know, and it was like felt kind of sorry for him and. You know, and was like, well, my husband's doing something, so I might as well do something, you know. But John Lithgow, you get that sense that, like, I kind of felt like in another life, then they could have actually had a good relationship together. It was sad. When the scene where, like, she leaves and he's just standing there is sad.
It is. No, you can see the attraction, you can see the superficial appeal, like how this would tempt both of them. But I do think that Larry McMurtry doesn't want them to be happy in his larger view. Like, he knows he's some part of him just going all the way back to authorial intent. There's some part of him that's just barreling towards tragedy.
Yes.
And hiding it really well.
Yes.
But you can just sort of feel...
It's tinged with that.
Yeah, you can feel it seep in here and there in the movie, even though it's much happier and brighter.
Yeah, I know, you're right. You're right. And again, that's life, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like the ill-fated thing before it begins, and both people know they shouldn't do that, and, you know, well, I mean, it's tragic the minute that she marries him.
Yeah. Yeah, everything's going to go wrong.
You know? And her mother knows it, so, I know. Anyway, but
that is the other thing, too. Yeah, Aurora's right. Yeah, she's right about almost everything. She's right the whole way through. She's right the whole way through. She just won't let people forget it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What does she always say to him? She's like, why are you always so mean to me? Or what does he say to her? I can't remember.
Why do you treat me? Yeah.
Yeah, why do you treat me
with... And he wants to know why she doesn't respect him, right? Something like that. Something like that.
And then also, she says, what's the other one? Why must you always challenge me? She says that to him. Those two characters are interesting too. And, you know, personally, like the mother and son-in-law dynamic is a complicated one too. So sure, yeah. I felt like it's just very real, the way it was all done.
Yeah, uncomfortably so. And with Flap, like, again, Daniel's...
For sure, uncomfortably so.
Yeah, Daniel's instincts are so good because you can see him play the role of the son-in-law. You can actually see him fake it.
Yes, and, like trying to be what he thinks she wants him to be.
And she sees right through it, and then it just gets worse. Yeah. It only gets worse.
Yeah. Exactly.
But he does what's required of him at the end of the film, like he does right by Emma.
The kids, yeah. I know.
It's just so... I think I'm trying to remember, there's a line in the book, and of course I can't remember what it is, but it exactly, but it is a bit about how he is trying. Yeah. And it's literally the best he can do. He can't do anything.
He can't do any more.
But he can try.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. And so many people can't do any more than that. You know, limited. That's what she always says about him. He's limited.
That's right. Yes.
He's limited, Emma. He has no imagination. He can't even fail when he gets the teaching job in Des Moines. He can't even fail locally. I can't remember what she said. Because she's got the best lines. She does. And I wonder, too, like, if she wrote... probably not, because it was from the book. I wondered if any of it was ad-libbed.
She makes it feel like it is,
right?
Though. Or that she's been holding it. Like, she's been sitting on this perfect line, waiting until he's in the room.
Yes.
You know, like, just these withering dismissals.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. No, she totally does.
And again, with that, how do you not end up playing the role that's been set out for you?
Yeah.
When there's no room to move. And for Emma as well, when she's with Aurora, she has to try harder to be heard. She has to try harder to be seen. Yeah. Everything is happening in this woman's shadow.
Yes.
So yes, okay, Shirley MacLaine's movie, whatever. But I still think that
it's her. It's both of them. It is her story, but she's eclipsed at every turn. You know, but she doesn't mind.
Yeah.
You never get the sense that she's resentful of her mother for the way that she is. She completely 100% accepts who that person who Shirley MacLaine is, right?
And that's what makes the performance so interesting because she's giving back. Like she's she's not shutting down.
No.
She's just rolling with everything.
Yeah.
And when I watch the film again, I watch her.
Yeah.
Because this sounds like I'm about to dismiss MacLaine. What Aurora does is really easily understood, and what Emma does is much more complex.
Her motives are different.
So she's playing a harder role, and again, one that you could overlook very easily because she's steamrolled at every point by her co-star.
Exactly. You're right. And that's probably why MacLaine did get they're different performances, but I would say as an audience watching, you'd be like, oh, well, I'm blown away by this person because they're so spectacular. You know, it's the smaller sort of nuances. Yeah. The way she speaks to her children, I'm like, oh my gosh, the way she is as a mom, like it's heartbreaking, you know. Yeah. I remember that, watching that before I had a child. I was like, this is the most natural, like her effortless like way just on screen, you know, in terms of like realistically relating to children and her husband and everything. I wish she's been in more films.
Yeah, she just kind of withdrew, apparently.
I know. I heard again part of it was she's difficult or, you know.
Yeah, you hear stuff.
Who knows?
She and it was Timothy Hutton, wasn't it? They were getting weird together doing things like she would show up in his film in drag as an angel. What was that film? Made in Heaven? The Alan Rudolph movie?
Oh, yeah.
She plays an angel named Emmett. And you're not supposed to recognize her, but it's so clearly transparent
that is
into her winger that...
Oh, yeah, that's so weird. That is weird.
But it was the 80s. It wasn't people indulged their strangest impulses in American indie films, plus there was probably a lot of cocaine around.
Exactly.
You know.
I heard that,
there's a whole documentary about her absence.
Yes, Searching for Devon Winger.
Yeah, have you seen it?
I haven't seen it.
It's around here somewhere. You're welcome
I would like to see
it,
actually, yeah.
You're
so sweet.
Yeah, it's very good. It's more of a comment about the lack of roles for women after a certain point in American cinema.
Well, I'm sure that's partly what happened. And she didn't strike me as somebody who would just play... I mean, she played a very girl next door kind of role, but
she wouldn't just go along with.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I feel that her personality was strong as a woman at that time, and maybe it wasn't necessarily as accepted. But Shirley MacLaine too. You know, she was quite. What I've read about her, she's very
she's outspoken on virtually every level. Yeah,
exactly.
Spent the entire 70s writing books about how.
Oh my gosh, out on a limb. I remember my mom. My mom had all of her books. That was the first time I ever learned about reincarnation. My mom bought Out on a Limb, I remember I was very young. And I remember she told me, and I was like, what do you mean? You can have more than one life? I don't understand, Mom.
Yeah. I've always wondered, every time these movies come up with some sort of reference to reincarnation, it's like, well, doesn't that mean that we were all reincarnated? How do you know who the new ones are? It's the George Carlin line, right?
It's the George Carlin line.
There used to be a handful of people, and now there's 4 billion. Someone's printing up souls. Where do they come from?
Exactly.
But MacLaine, she's fascinating.
She's very fascinating.
One assumes that just everybody from that era is eccentric in some way because you get indulged in.
Sure.
And
but like, look at Jane Fonda.
Celebrated.
She went very straight and narrow for the most part. Like, I mean, she was in
post
70s and then 80s.
Comeback,
80s kind of, you know.
But she was also, protesting the war in the 60s, and she was an activist and she was outspoken. There's some stuff in the Clute DVD. There's some documentary material about just how she's basically making activist statements right up until they call action, and doing stuff, and then pivoting back to work.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and now she is. Well, I mean, she basically is Hollywood royalty at this point.
She is. Yeah,
so,
she is. Yeah. And she's done a lot of cool things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But
she's had so many. Fonda's had so many different identities. I mean. She's making films with Godard in the 60s, and protesting the war, and then the workout video years.
The workout videos. Now, I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's wild. She's had a total up and down. And she stayed through it all. And,
she's never not been herself. I mean, she's absolutely doing what she wants to do.
Right, yeah.
And Winger, I'm just trying to think if there's a film that she made that represents... Betrayed isn't really it. That was just a Joe Esterhaus scripted thriller kind of thing.
What was the other film that she did close after Terms of Endearment? It was maybe before...
An Officer and a Gentleman was before Terms of Endearment, and then I'd forgotten she did The Sheltering Sky with Bertolucci, but that was a few years later.
Yeah, she did. That's interesting.
Yeah,
because I like her performance, and I liked Bertolucci and Shadowlands.
Shadowlands, that's right. Oh, that's right. I remember thinking in Shadowlands that while what
And
happens
Rachel
to her...
getting married. That's what I remember seeing her. She was great in it.
Ridiculous that I couldn't think of that. Just with Demi dying yesterday, it's been all over the place. And she's great in that.
She's
yeah,
great.
she is, because she's carrying... It's that thing that you never want to see an actor do, which is hide one thing for the whole movie.
Yes.
That would come up naturally.
Yes.
But the context of it is that she literally can't speak it.
She can't speak it.
It's fine. And she's great. And then the second time you watch that movie and it just breaks your heart what she's doing.
It hurts you. I know.
Yeah.
I know. No, she's great. The performance is really great.
Yeah. And she pulled off Shadowlands, even though it's essentially a repeat.
Yeah, it is a repeat,
in a
right?
weird way of Terms of Endearment. But
Yeah.
it's why... I guess it's why you'd cast her. You know she can do it. You know
Maybe
that
because
she
you've
can
seen
make
her
it
do it
believable.
before. It's interesting why people make choices casting-wise, because you never know.
Yeah.
And sometimes I often think people opt for the safe choice, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you want a film to be successful.
Exactly.
Generally the path of least resistance and all
Exactly.
that. It's not a... Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, this is the perfect movie for a guy who's worked in television, because it lets you do broad strokes, but in a cumulative way, that they all build up to something.
Yes.
And Brooks, I mean, I think his next film is probably his best film, Broadcast News, which is...
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Another huge time-defining, era-spanning epic, but one with more to say than just relationship stuff. But then there's nothing wrong with relationship stuff,
I should have picked Broadcast News.
Oh, that's okay. This is good too.
Oh no. Every movie, this is why I had trouble letting you know. It took me like a week. I was like, what about this one? And what about this one? And what about I could say this about this. There's so many good ones.
Yeah, don't get in your own head. Just go with your gut.
Holly Hunter is one of my favorites as well.
She's fantastic. Yeah, she's wonderful.
Yeah.
Someone will. We'll get to it someday. But Terms is, on its own, still pretty damn good.
Yeah,
I'm really glad you chose
great.
it.
It's a personal, I opted for the personal route as opposed to just clear cinematography and film classicness, because I was like, I felt like if I had an intimate connection to it.
So I was going to ask, given that its star has kind of faded, do you force it on people? Do you experience resistance when you tell people that it's good? Because I've had
film?
Yeah, I've had that happen once or twice.
I find that a lot about films that took place in the 70s or the 80s, or like people sort of just dismiss them if they're not a classic, if they're not a 50s or a 60s film. It's like 70s, I don't know.
They're in that window. Right?
Kind
There's
of.
that little space where things aren't taken.
And there's a bit of, like, people are like, is it soap opera-y? Is it melodramatic? It looks like romantic. And it is. It's romantic and it's dramatic. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't say it's melodramatic, because I think the performances are really grounded and real. And I wouldn't say it's soapy, because I think it's original. I think it's real life. Like, I think it's... but yeah, for sure. And I feel like my tastes are all a little stuck in the in the 70s and the 80s. And maybe it's because of when I grew up.
Yeah, we're shaped by...
You're shaped by what, yeah. Like, if I think of all my favorite movies, they're definitely... And music is that time period for me as well.
Yeah.
And you know what it is? It's simple. And things are much more clever now. It's not a Wes Anderson film. It's not a...
Right.
It's not a fast-paced storyline, layered, complex character. There's no... It's just what it is.
Right.
It's just a simple story about people and a family and their life. And it's very linear, even though it goes different time periods. And I think maybe people want more action and more excitement in some things. Even... I just saw Manchester by the Sea, and oh my gosh, like, broke my heart. It was very, like,
as a parent, that's going to be...
Yeah, so again, it's a moving family story, but it's more stylistic. There's a little bit more going on.
Well, even just the use of music tells you how to feel a lot.
Exactly. There's a lot going on, whereas this is just really stripped down, pared down, like basic 80s family drama that is really, really well done,
Yeah, I mean...
It's just great acting and great directing and writing.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of films that sort of try to do it, and well, not that many, really. Not that many
I think
succeed.
they think they have to have something else. I think it's like I'm trying to think of something simple that I've seen recently. Everything is so categorized, too, into genres now. It's like, okay, you're making a sci-fi, you're making a thriller, you're making a romantic comedy. This had a little bit of, romance and a little tragedy and a little, it just is like for me, it's like a simpler time.
Yeah. It's
like a simpler time in the film. It's a simpler time in the style of making it. And I guess that's what I like. It's the nostalgia for, sort of how I grew. I like the clothes remind me of my childhood, right? I guess.
Sure.
That kind of stuff. And I think when something speaks to you, like, the mother-daughter relationship really spoke to me. There's a lot of dysfunction there. But there's also like a huge amount of love. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's an uncomplicated, it's a straightforward character piece. And that's all it needs to be.
Yeah.
Now I guess you could have somebody who's also a time traveler. But
sure.
What would be the point? Although, actually, that could be really
a time traveler. Oh, you're so cute.
Someone who shows up to sort of kind of warn Emma away from
someone comes
choice
in, exactly. But then, like, broadcast news, it's a bit more complex, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's
a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of commentary
very fast.
going on. Yeah.
It's more. It reminds me of. Oh my gosh, my brain.
Okay.
What's the show?
The Newsroom, the Sorkin
Yes,
film?
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just
that's just because Jeff Daniels is in there.
It's just the rapidity and the quickness of thought and character. And
Aaron Sorkin wishes he was as good with that as
he
Brooks.
wishes.
Because Brooks really is. That is.
He was the original,
script.
right?
Yeah. He showed. He built the machine. He built the engine, and God, that's 30 years now.
30 years.
It's just sort of following along in its way.
No, it's true, and it took that long for it to. I do think that. I don't know. I feel that way about music in the 70s too. I just feel like a lot of things were already done, and then we're just we're redoing them, and this is how we roll.
Well, now everything that
we're borrowing.
Every established property is being remade. Everything is being reinvented because why not? It's cheaper and people already recognize it.
And they know people will buy it.
Yeah. The Gilmore Girls reunion just makes me think that.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
That basically is Terms of Endearment.
Yeah.
Just without the tragedy. We're not there yet.
It's true.
I worry about Rory sometimes for that very reason. But this can bring us to the last question, to the final question of the podcast, which is always the same, which is like, what of Terms of Endearment have you borrowed or stolen or absorbed into your own creative DNA? Has it surfaced in your work?
I would say I'm just really drawn to those kind of performances. Shirley MacLaine and Deborah Winger, to me, it's like that fierce, unabashed, raw emotionalism that is obviously what I strive for as an actor, and the listening, and the real like sharp clocking of other characters in the scenes, and I really do enjoy playing that gray area of people too. So that, like we talked about, the not perfect part. So as much as I can borrow in my own performances, is like I just find it so dull and not interesting to watch a character that's good or bad, because no human is just good or bad.
Right.
The messiness. I like the messiness. I like the vulnerability, and I strive for that. As much as possible. There's a lot of technical skill going on there as well.
Sure.
And obviously to strive to be somebody like Shirley MacLaine would be incredible, and Deborah Winger as well. But I think when I was young, I think that's what caught me. It was just very arresting, and you watch somebody whose work is not, it feels just organic. It doesn't feel like they're acting. Obviously for me as an actor, that's what I would want, to strive for in my terms of my best work. I just personally want to the stuff I saw in it, and that I hope, if I have borrowed anything from it, is just to how can I make this resonate for myself, so that somebody else watching it could relate. It's just very basic,
Right.
But that's what I felt when I watched it. I was like, oh my gosh, the universalness of watching this, I see my whole life, and so if those characters make me think of that, and definitely I've tried to draw from that. Every time I see a great film, though, every time you see something where you're like, oh, that's so great, I would love to do that. But but just a good reminder about not having it to have it be super complicated too, and just like the emotion is enough, and not forcing, and
Right.
just being, and just like accepting. Like there's a sense of just sort of owning and accepting whoever the character is, and not having to really push anything too much. And and I really do think that there's another. I always think of like Laura Dern too, because she's just not pretty. You know, like Deborah Winger does not care about being pretty. Shirley MacLaine does not care about being pretty, or maybe they do, but it's like that sense of what's most important is just being as truthful as possible in the scene.
Right.
You know,
stay out of the way.
Yeah.
Just do the thing.
Yeah. Like Laura Dern, I always remember she's always all over the place. You know, but she's so compelling to watch. That's how I feel about Deborah Winger and Shirley MacLaine. I can just hope for that, strive for that.
And don't date Jeff Daniels.
And do not date Jeff Daniels. No.
It's a life tip. It's a good tip.
Exactly. Well, just don't ever marry someone named Flap, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's a red flag.
Can you imagine? Mom, I found the man I want to marry.
I love that they never figure out where it comes from.
You never say where it comes from.
There's no origin.
No.
He's just called
He's
Flap.
just Flap. Yeah,
As
they never
though
say his
that's a
real name.
thing.
They never do. You're right.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
I mean, maybe it's short for Flapitus or something. Some kind of horrible parenting choice that he's been striving to.
I think it actually is a nickname, a derivative of something, though.
I mean, it must be, but ugh.
Wonder Frank? No. You know, there's so many like names for George or
John Jack.
Yeah, whatever, right? Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, go look it up. And
I think it's very American.
Flap.
It's American.
Still a winning son.
Terrible. Flap, who lives in Des Moines.
Ugh. I don't like him already. My thanks to Rachel Wilson, who you can see in the new film First Round Down, opening in Toronto this Friday, May 5th, before rolling out across the rest of Canada later this spring. And thanks also to Winnie Wong. She knows what she did. You can find Rachel on Twitter at Rachel_Wilson1, the 1 is a numeral, and you can find Terms of Endearment on Blu-ray and DVD from Paramount Home Entertainment. It's also available for sale and rental on iTunes and Google Play. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you want to leave a review on iTunes, that would be very kind of you. Don't forget to mention that Flap is a stupid name. Thanks for listening.
Hold it, fellas. I'm afraid you're just too darn loud.